Dr. Hyun-ki stared at the video screen, his four eyes blinking in disbelief. "Play it again," he ordered, his scaled fingers tapping nervously on the metal desk. The recording showed a human female putting small red pods into her mouth and actually seeming to enjoy them. According to their sensors, these pods contained enough capsaicin to cause severe pain responses in most species. The research station orbiting Earth buzzed with activity. It had been 3 months since the Galactic Research Institute had started their official study of humanity, and every day brought new surprises. Dr. Hyun-ki called Jae-yun from her monitoring station. "You need to see this. The humans are doing it again." She pulled up another video feed on the main screen. This time, it showed humans jumping off perfectly good transport vehicles with nothing but fabric bags strapped to their backs. They were falling through the air at terminal velocity, laughing and making strange hand signals to each other before opening their parachutes. "Add it to the list," Hyun-ki said, his head frills flattening in confusion. "File it under voluntary exposure to fatal risks." The list was getting very long. Sun Mai, their nutrition expert, walked into the observation room carrying a stack of data tablets. Her usually bright purple scales had turned a pale lilac from stress. "I've finished analyzing their entertainment activities," she announced. "You won't believe this. They have something called ghost peppers that they eat for fun." For fun. The chemical analysis shows it's practically a weapon. Hyun-ki nodded slowly. "Add it to the food section, right next to the report about something called wasabi challenges." The research team had been chosen specifically for this mission because of their experience with Deathworld species. But humans were different from any Deathworld species they had studied before. Most species from high-gravity, dangerous planets developed careful, cautious behaviors. They survived by avoiding risks. Humans seemed to actively seek them out. New data from the sports division. Ta-won called out as he hurried into the room. The younger researchers' scales were flushed with excitement. They have this activity called free climbing. They climb tall rock formations without any safety equipment. Some of these rocks are over 1,000 meters high. Hyun-ki's frills twitched. "Are they using anti-gravity units?" "No, sir. Just their hands and feet." "And this is entertainment?" "Yes, sir. They call it a hobby." The lead researcher walked to the window, gazing down at the blue-green planet below. When they'd first discovered Earth, they had classified it as a death world immediately. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, dangerous wildlife, volatile weather, and active geology made it seem almost uninhabitable to most galactic species. Finding intelligent life there wasn't surprising. Death worlds often produced intelligent species, but finding a species that treated their already dangerous planet as some sort of playground, that was new. "Sir," Jae-yun called out softly, "the council is asking for our preliminary report. What should I tell them?" Hyun-ki turned from the window, his scales shifting to a thoughtful blue color. "Tell them," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell them we've discovered something unprecedented. The humans aren't just death world survivors. They appear to be actively engaging with deadly conditions as some sort of cultural practice. Should we recommend quarantine protocols?" Sunlight asked, her scales paling further at the thought. "No," Hyun-ki said firmly. "We need to understand this first. There must be a reason. No species survives this long by being purely self-destructive." He walked back to his desk and pressed a button on his console. "Send a request to the council. We need permission to begin direct contact studies." "Are you sure that's wise?" Jae-yun asked. "No," Hyun-ki admitted. "But the humans have already detected several of our observation satellites. They're going to make contact with the galactic community soon, whether we're ready or not. We need to understand them before that happens." He looked at the various screens showing humans engaging in their bewildering range of recreational activities. "And most importantly," he added, "we need to understand how they've survived this long. Because everything we're seeing defies our current models of species survival and evolution." The research team nodded in agreement, their scales showing a mix of anxiety and excitement. They were about to attempt something that seemed almost as reckless as human behavior. Direct contact with a species that appeared to actively seek out danger. As if to emphasize their concerns, a new alert popped up on their screens. Somewhere on Earth, humans were now racing vehicles at lethal speeds. For entertainment, Do-hyun walked into the alien research station with a grin on his face. The engineers back on Earth had told him the station's gravity was set to match Earth's, but it felt slightly off, just enough to make each step feel bouncy and light. "Please remain still for decontamination," a computerized voice announced. A soft blue light swept over him from head to toe. Dr. Hyun-ki watched through the observation window as their first human test subject went through intake procedures. The young engineer had volunteered immediately when Earth's governments announced the alien research program. "His vital signs are concerning," Jae-yun said, checking her monitors. Heart rate elevated, adrenaline levels high. "Is he afraid?" Sunlei asked, her scales shifting to a worried yellow. "No," Jae-yun replied, puzzled. "According to these readings, he's excited." The decontamination finished, and Do-hyun walked into the main laboratory. He looked around with wide eyes at the advanced equipment and alien researchers. His heart rate increased even more. "Welcome to Research Station 7, Dr. Hyun-ki said carefully in practiced English. "Are you feeling well? Your biological readings show elevated stress responses." Do-hyun laughed. "I'm not stressed. I'm thrilled. This is amazing. I'm the first human to set foot on an alien space station. Well, officially at least." He walked up to a floating holographic display and reached out to touch it. "Please don't." Hyun-ki started, but Do-hyun had already put his hand through the hologram. "Cool. How does it work? Is it photonic manipulation or something else?" "The resolution is incredible." Do-hyun moved closer to examine the projector base. The research team watched in alarm as their test subject began asking detailed technical questions about everything he saw. This wasn't the careful, cautious behavior they expected from a species meeting advanced aliens for the first time. "Mr. Do-hyun," Ta-1 interrupted, "we have a schedule of tests prepared. Perhaps we should begin with." "Is that a quantum processor?" Do-hyun asked, already halfway across the room. He was looking at a piece of equipment that was indeed a quantum computer, but was also clearly marked as sensitive equipment. "Step away from that, please," Dr. Hyun-ki said firmly. "It's dangerous to untrained personnel." Do-hyun stepped back, but his eyes were shining with interest. "Dangerous how? Does it emit radiation? What kind of shielding do you use?" The research team exchanged looks. Their test subject wasn't showing any fear of potentially lethal technology. Instead, he seemed more interested the more dangerous something was. "Perhaps we should start with basic medical examinations," Jae-yun suggested, trying to guide Do-hyun toward the medical bay. "Sure. Hey, what's that thing that looks like a giant microscope?" Do-hyun asked as they walked. "That's actually a molecular destabilizer," Jae-yun explained without thinking. She immediately regretted it when Do-hyun's face lit up with fascination. "Really? How does it work? What do you destabilize? Can I see it in action?" Dr. Hyun-ki watched as his team tried to keep up with their human guests' endless questions about the most dangerous equipment in the lab. He made notes on his tablet. Subject shows no fear response to lethal hazards. Instead, displays increased interest in proportion to potential danger. Possible psychological disorder or species-wide trait. The day continued with Do-hyun treating every safety warning as a fascinating new discovery to be explored. When they finally guided him to his quarters for the night, the research team was exhausted. "I've never seen anything like it," Sunmai said, her scales a tired gray color. He treated every lethal hazard like a new toy. "Did you see how he responded to the warning about the plasma conduits?" Ta-1 added. "He asked if he could help upgrade them." Dr. Hyun-ki looked at his notes again. If he's a typical example of his species, we may need to completely revise our understanding of Death World psychology. Sir, Jai Yun called from her station. You should see this. The cameras in his quarters. They all turned to look at the monitor. Do Hyun wasn't resting. Instead, he was doing something called push-ups while reading technical manuals about the station's systems on a tablet. Add it to the list, Dr. Hyun-ki sighed. Under voluntary physical strain during rest period. The list was definitely getting longer. He's doing what? Dr. Hyun-ki's scales flashed a bright orange in alarm. He's requested permission to set up a rock climbing wall in the station's empty storage bay, Jai Yun repeated, looking at her tablet. He says it's for exercise. It had been 2 weeks since Do Hyun arrived at the station, and he had managed to surprise the research team every single day. Sun Lai burst into the room, her scales a pale green with shock. You won't believe what he just did in the nutrition lab, she exclaimed. I was showing him our food synthesis unit, and he asked if it could make something called extra hot sauce. When I said no, he pulled out a small bottle from his personal items, and she paused, trying to compose herself. What happened? Dr. Hyun-ki asked, dreading the answer. He put this red liquid on his food. Our sensors detected enough capsaicin to kill a small verdaxian. But he just ate it. Then he said it wasn't hot enough. Taiwan, who had been analyzing Do Hyun's physical activity patterns, looked up from his station. That's nothing. Yesterday, he asked if we could adjust the gravity controls in his quarters to make it more challenging during his workout sessions. Dr. Hyun-ki's frills drooped. He walked to the observation window, watching their human subject who was currently doing one-armed push-ups while reading a technical manual about the station's fusion reactor. I don't understand, he said quietly. Everything we know about Death World species tells us they should be cautious, conservative in their actions, focused on survival. But humans, he gestured at Do Hyun, who had now moved on to something called burpees. Sir, Jai Yun called out. He's submitted another request. He wants to know if we can set up a hot sauce tasting competition with the research team. Sun Mi's scales went completely white. Absolutely not. I've analyzed that substance. It's practically a weapon. Just then, Do Hyun walked into the observation room, still slightly sweating from his workout. Oh good, you got my requests. About the climbing wall. I've already drawn up some safety protocols. And for the hot sauce tasting, I brought different levels so we can start mild. The research team stared at him in horror. What? Do Hyun asked, looking confused. I thought this was a cultural exchange. These are pretty normal Earth activities. Normal? Sun Mi squeaked. You consider consuming pain-inducing chemicals normal? Well, yeah. Wait until I tell you about our eating contests. There's this place that serves something called the Ghost Pepper Challenge and... Stop. Dr. Hyun-ki held up his hands. Please, we need to understand something. Why do humans deliberately seek out these uncomfortable experiences? Do Hyun thought for a moment. I guess because it's fun, and it helps us grow stronger, like working out with increased gravity, or climbing harder routes, or trying spacier foods. It's all about pushing our limits. The research team was silent, processing this information. Besides, Do Hyun continued cheerfully, this is all pretty tame stuff. I haven't even mentioned skydiving or free solo climbing yet. Taiwan quickly looked up these terms in the Earth database. His scales turned a sickly gray color. You jump from high altitudes. For entertainment? He asked weakly. Yeah, the view is amazing. Hey, do you think we could set up a space diving program here? With proper safety measures, of course. Dr. Hyun-ki's frills flattened completely against his head. Add it to the list, he said faintly, under potentially suicidal recreation requests. Oh, come on, Do Hyun said, grinning. It's not that bad. Listen, let's start small. How about we just try the mild hot sauce first? It's barely even spicy, only about 5,000 Scoville units. Sun Mai quickly converted this measurement and made a small distressed sound. I'll bring the sauce to the lunch break, Du Hyun said happily as he headed back to his workout. Trust me, you'll love it. The research team watched him go, their scales showing a rainbow of stress colors. Sir, Jae-yun said quietly, should we inform the council about these recreational habits? Dr. Hyun-ki shook his head. Not yet. First, we need to understand how their species survived long enough to develop space travel. Because right now, nothing makes sense. Red warning lights flashed across the research station. The main reactor was showing dangerous power fluctuations, and the backup systems weren't responding properly. How long until critical failure? Dr. Hyun-ki asked, his scales shifting between emergency red and worried gray. 20 minutes, Ta-won replied, frantically working at his console. The safety systems are locked out. We can't shut it down remotely. Begin evacuation procedures, Dr. Hyun-ki ordered. The reactor going critical would destroy the station, but they had enough time to get everyone to the escape pods. Wait, Du Hyun called out from his observation area. Let me look at it. I might be able to help. Absolutely not, Jae-yun said firmly. The reactor chamber is flooded with radiation. It's lethal to organics. Do-hyun was already pulling up the reactor schematics on his tablet. The radiation suits in your storage. They'll give me about 15 minutes of safe exposure time. Right. 10 minutes at most, Sun Mai corrected. And that's assuming. That's enough time, Do-hyun interrupted. He was already heading for the storage bay. I saw something weird in the maintenance logs yesterday. I think I know what's wrong. Dr. Hyun-ki moved to stop him. This is exactly the kind of behavior we've been studying. Your species' tendency to rush into deadly situations. We have evacuation protocols. Do-hyun stopped and turned around. His face was serious for once. Look, I get it. You think humans are crazy because we take risks. But we take calculated risks. I'm an engineer. I study your reactor design. The escape pods are a bigger risk right now. If the reactor goes critical, the explosion could catch them in the blast radius. The research team stared at him. For the first time, they saw something different in his eyes. Not the usual excitement about danger, but calm, careful calculation. 18 minutes to critical, Ta-won announced. Trust me, Do-hyun said. I have a plan. Dr. Hyun-ki's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a decisive blue. Explain your plan. Quickly. Do-hyun pulled up the reactor schematics on the main screen. Yesterday, I noticed the maintenance logs showed micro-fluctuations in the cooling system. Too small to trigger alarms, but in a pattern. Someone or something has been making tiny adjustments, slowly pushing the system toward failure. But they did it so gradually that the safety protocols didn't catch it. 16 minutes, Ta-won called out. The fail-safes are locked out because they think they're working normally. We need to trigger a manual emergency shutdown, but the controls in the reactor room are physically locked. Normal procedure says cut power and wait for cooldown. But we don't have time for that. 15 minutes. I can climb through the maintenance shaft, bypass the locked controls, and trigger an emergency shutdown directly from the reactor housing. It's not safe, but it will work. The research team looked at each other. Everything they knew about proper safety protocols said this was madness. The radiation levels, Sun Mai started, will give me radiation sickness. Yes, Do-hyun acknowledged, but your medical bay can treat that. A reactor explosion will kill everyone. 14 minutes. Dr. Hyun-ki made his decision. Do it. The next 12 minutes were the longest of the research team's lives. They watched on cameras as Do-hyun, wrapped in a radiation suit, climbed through maintenance shafts never meant for human access. His vital signs on their monitors showed the rising radiation exposure, but he kept moving. When he finally reached the reactor housing, his hands were steady as he worked, even as the radiation warnings in his suit screamed at him. "It's done," he called over the radio. "Reactors shutting down. Going back now. Feeling a bit sick, though." The research team rushed to meet him at the maintenance shaft exit. He collapsed as soon as he climbed out, straight into the medical team's care. Later, after Do-hyun was stable in the medical bay, Dr. Hyun-ki updated his research notes. "Today I understood something vital about humans. What we saw as reckless behavior was actually careful planning combined with a willingness to act. They don't take risks because they're crazy. They take risks because they've calculated that sometimes the risk of not acting is greater than the risk of action. I believe we've been wrong about them all along. We need to update all our previous conclusions." In the medical bay, Do-hyun was already asking when he could get back to work. Hae-nul arrived at Research Station 7 3 days after the reactor incident. The young xenobiologist walked into a research center that was still buzzing with excitement over Do-hyun's actions. "You must be the new specialist," Dr. Hyun-ki said, his scales a welcoming shade of green. "Your timing is excellent. We've just had a major breakthrough in understanding human behavior." "I heard about the reactor incident," Hae-nul replied, her own scales shifting to show interest. "That's actually why I requested this assignment. I have a different theory about humans." She set up her workstation while explaining. "We've been looking at humans all wrong. We keep calling their actions self-destructive. But what if they're not? What if this is actually an advanced survival strategy?" The research team gathered around as she pulled up her research on the main screen. Do-hyun, now recovered from his radiation exposure thanks to the medical bay's advanced treatment, watched with particular interest. "Look at human history," Hae-nul continued. "Every major advancement they made came from what we would call dangerous behavior. They saw fire and decided to master it. They looked at storms and decided to sail through them. They discovered radiation and chose to study it. But that's exactly what makes them dangerous," Sunmai argued. "Normal species avoid these things. And normal species take millions of years to evolve," Hae-nul countered. "Humans went from stone tools to space travel in a few thousand years. That's unprecedented." Do-hyun raised his hand like he was in a classroom. "Can I add something here?" The aliens turned to look at him. After the reactor incident, they were paying much more attention to his input. "She's right," he said. "Take cooking with fire. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, we probably burned ourselves a lot learning to control it. But it let us get more nutrients from our food, which helped our brains grow bigger. The risk paid off." Hae-nul's scales brightened with excitement. "Exactly. And it's not just fire. Human children learn by taking risks. Touching things, climbing things, tasting things. Your species builds up risk assessment abilities from an early age. That's why they seem to seek out danger," Ta-won said slowly, beginning to understand. "They're not being reckless. They're practicing. Like Do-hyun's rock climbing," Jae-yun added. "It seems pointless and dangerous to us, but it builds strength and problem-solving skills. And teaches us how to handle fear," Do-hyun said. "When you're hanging off a cliff face for fun, other scary situations feel more manageable." Dr. Hyun-ki listened to all this, his scales showing deep thought. This would explain the reactor incident. "You weren't being reckless at all, were you? You'd been studying our systems, preparing for problems, even if you didn't know it." Do-hyun nodded. "It's kind of a human thing. We like to understand how things work, especially dangerous things, because understanding them makes them less dangerous." Hae-nul pulled up more data on her screen. "I've analyzed thousands of human extreme sports and activities. They all show the same pattern. Humans deliberately expose themselves to controlled danger to build skills they might need in real emergencies. Even the spicy food?" Sunmai asked, her scales still showing skepticism. "Even that," Hae-nul confirmed. "Capsaicin tolerance builds resistance to certain types of pain and stress. Plus, spicy foods have antimicrobial properties. Humans turned a plant's defense mechanism into a survival advantage. The research team spent the rest of the day reviewing their data with this new perspective. Everything they had labeled as self-destructive looked different now. Dr. Hyun-Ki updated his research notes one more time. With Hae-Newell's insights, we're beginning to understand. Humans don't have a death wish. They had a life wish so strong they're willing to risk death to improve their chances of survival. Every seemingly dangerous activity serves a purpose in building skills, knowledge, or capabilities. The real question now is, what does this mean for the galactic community? A species that turns dangers into advantages, that seeks out challenges to grow stronger. They might change everything we think we know about survival and evolution. In the background, Do-hyun was already teaching some of the braver researchers how to climb his newly approved rock wall. Dr. Hyun-Ki stood before the holographic display, showing centuries of human history to the research team. After 2 weeks of working with Hae-Newell's new theory, they had made an amazing discovery. "Look at this pattern," he said, pointing to the timeline. Every major disaster in human history was followed by huge leaps in technology and survival skills. The team watched as he highlighted different events. Plagues led to better medicine. Famines led to better farming. Wars led to rapid advancement in everything from flight to computers. But here's the truly fascinating part, Hae-Newell added, stepping forward. Humans don't just react to disasters. They prepare for them before they happen. Do-hyun sat quietly in the corner, watching the aliens finally understand his species. He was drinking something called extra hot coffee, which had made Sunmi's scales turn white when she analyzed its caffeine content. Take their entertainment, Hae-Newell continued. Action movies show disasters that haven't happened yet. Video games let them practice handling dangerous situations safely. Even their children's games often involve running, hiding, and solving problems under pressure. Jae-yun pulled up her own research data and their training programs. Their emergency workers deliberately practice in dangerous conditions. Their soldiers train in all types of weather. Their doctors practice surgeries on simulations before doing the real thing. Exactly. Hae-Newell's scales flickered with excitement. Every crazy human activity we've seen has a hidden purpose. They're not being reckless. They're preparing for every possible problem they can think of. Todd-Won, who had been analyzing the data, spoke up. According to these calculations, humans have survived at least 12 events that should have wiped out their entire species. Each time, they came back stronger. Do-hyun finished his coffee and raised his hand. You know what we call those near-extinction events. Learning experiences. The research team stared at him. You're saying, Dr. Hyun-Ki said slowly, that your species treats near-death experiences as educational opportunities. Pretty much, Do-hyun shrugged. We have this saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We take it pretty seriously. Sun-mi, who had finally tried a very mild hot sauce the day before, shook her head in wonder. Your entire species deliberately makes things hard for themselves just to learn from it. Well, yeah, Do-hyun said. How else would we get better at handling real problems when they show up? Dr. Hyun-Ki turned back to the historical data. This changes everything we thought we knew about evolution. Most species evolve to avoid danger. Humans evolve by challenging themselves with danger in controlled ways. It's like an evolutionary shortcut. Hae-Newell added, instead of waiting for natural selection to make them stronger over millions of years, they force themselves to adapt quickly through artificial challenges. And it works, Taiwan said, showing more data. Their rate of advancement is hundreds of times faster than any other known species. They've done in a few thousand years what takes most species millions. Dr. Hyun-Ki began writing his report to the Galactic Council. We must revise our understanding of human behavior. What we saw as self-destructive is actually an advanced form of species-wide self-improvement. Their seemingly random dangerous activities are part of a complex system for rapid adaptation and problem-solving. Humans don't just survive their death world. They actively use its dangers to make themselves stronger. Every challenge becomes a lesson. Every risk becomes a chance to improve. Most importantly, they've developed a culture that encourages controlled risk-taking while learning from failures. They don't avoid danger. They master it. Do-hyun read the report over his shoulder. You know what's really going to blow your minds? We do this for fun. The whole process of challenging ourselves and getting better. We actually enjoy it. The research team's scales all shifted to show various degrees of amazement and disbelief. Which reminds me, Do-hyun added cheerfully, who's ready to try the medium hot sauce today? Sun Mi's scales went pale again, but Hae-nul stepped forward. I'll try it. For science, of course. That's the spirit. Do-hyun grinned. See, you're learning to think like a human already. The asteroid came out of nowhere. A small chunk of space rock, barely bigger than a shuttle, had been hidden in the sun's glare until it was almost too late. Now it was heading straight for Research Station 7. Impact in 40 minutes, the computer announced calmly. Standard defensive systems offline due to maintenance cycle. Dr. Hyun-ki's scales turned ash-gray as he looked at the trajectory. The asteroid would hit them directly, and their main weapons were down for routine updates. Emergency protocol states we should evacuate, Jae-yun said, already pulling up the escape pod procedures. Wait. Do-hyun had been quiet since the alert started, staring at the station schematics on his tablet. We have another option. A crazy, human option. The research team turned to look at him. After everything they'd learned about human problem-solving, they were ready to listen. The maintenance bots, Do-hyun said. The ones we use to repair the station's outer hull. How many do we have? 12, Ta-won answered. But they're not designed for pushing away asteroids. No, but they have magnetic grapples for holding onto the station, right? And small maneuvering thrusters. Hae-nul's scales brightened as she caught on. You want to use the maintenance bots to push the asteroid off course. Exactly. Do-hyun was already running calculations. If we attach all 12 bots to one side of the asteroid and fire their thrusters at full power, that's completely against safety protocols, Sun Mi protested. Those bots are expensive and delicate. And replaceable, Do-hyun interrupted. Unlike us. Dr. Hyun-ki looked at the asteroid's path again. The thrust calculations. They would have to be perfect. Too much push in the wrong direction could send it spinning into the station instead of away from it. Good thing you have a human engineer who spends his free time playing zero-gravity video games. Do-hyun grinned. I've been practicing these kinds of calculations for fun since I was a kid. 35 minutes to impact, the computer reminded them. Dr. Hyun-ki made his decision. Do it. What do you need? The next 20 minutes were a blur of activity. Do-hyun worked with Ta-won to reprogram the maintenance bots while Hae-nul and Jae-yun calculated the exact point where they needed to intercept the asteroid. The tricky part, Do-hyun explained as they worked, is that we only get one shot. If the bots miss or the asteroid starts spinning, then we die, Sun Mi said bluntly, her scales showing stress patterns. Then we use our backup plan, Do-hyun corrected. But let's focus on plan A first. They launched the bots with 10 minutes to spare. The whole research team watched the screens as 12 small machines raced toward the approaching rock of death. This is exactly the kind of ridiculous solution that made us think humans were crazy, Jae-yun said, watching the bots approach their target. And now? Do-hyun asked, his fingers flying over the control panel as he guided the bots into position. Now we're counting on that crazy, she replied. The bots reached the asteroid with 5 minutes left. Do-hyun's hundreds of hours of gaming practice showed as he perfectly positioned each bot on the asteroid's surface. Magnetic grapples engaged, he announced, preparing for thrust. 3 minutes to impact, the computer said. Firing thrusters in 3, 2, 1. The whole station held its breath as 12 maintenance bots fired their small thrusters at full power. For a terrifying moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the asteroid began to turn. "It's working," Newell called out, watching the trajectory changes. "The new path will miss us by 3 kilometers." The research team's scales all shifted to show relief colors. Do-hyun kept his eyes on the controls until the asteroid was well past them, then finally relaxed. "Not bad for a crazy human solution, right?" he asked, grinning. Dr. Hyun-ki looked at the maintenance spots, still attached to the asteroid as it drifted away. "We lost 12 expensive repair units. But we saved the station and everyone on it," Do-hyun pointed out. "I'd call that a good trade." "Yes," Dr. Hyun-ki agreed, his scales showing a new color, one that indicated respect. "A very human way of calculating risk and reward. Perhaps we need more of that in our protocols." The main hall of the Galactic Science Council was packed. Scientists from 100 different worlds had come to hear the presentation from Research Station 7. Dr. Hyun-ki stood at the podium, his scales a calm professional blue, while Do-hyun sat in the front row with the research team. "Distinguished colleagues," Dr. Hyun-ki began, "we must completely change how we think about Death World species, and humans in particular." He showed the first image. Earth, with all its natural disasters, dangerous wildlife, and extreme environments. "We thought this world would produce cautious survivors. Instead, it produced humans." He glanced at Do-hyun. "And we have been completely wrong about what that means." The next images showed humans doing various dangerous activities: climbing mountains, diving in oceans, testing new machines, and exploring caves. "We called these behaviors self-destructive. We were wrong. These are not signs of a species with a death wish. They are signs of a species that has mastered the art of controlled risk-taking for advancement." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Newell stepped up to present the data. "Look at human history," she said. "Every major advancement came from what we would call dangerous behavior. But humans don't just take risks. They study them, practice them, and turn them into advantages." She showed clips of human training programs: pilots in simulators, doctors practicing surgery, children learning to swim. "They even train their young to handle danger in safe ways," she explained. "By the time a human reaches adulthood, they have years of practice in risk assessment and problem solving." Sun-mi presented next, showing her nutritional research. Even their food choices show this pattern. They deliberately eat painful substances to build tolerance. They try new foods that could be poisonous, but they do it carefully, learning from each experience. The council members watched in fascination as To-won presented the station's recent crisis. "When faced with an incoming asteroid, standard protocol said evacuate," he explained. "But our human engineer saw another option, one that saved both lives and valuable research data. This wasn't reckless behavior. It was rapid, creative problem-solving under pressure." Jae-yun stepped forward with the final analysis. "Humans don't just survive their death world. They use its challenges to make themselves stronger. Every danger becomes a training opportunity. Every crisis becomes a chance to improve." Dr. Hyun-ki returned to the podium. "We propose a new classification: progressive deathworlders, species that not only survive harsh conditions, but actively use them to accelerate their development." The council chamber erupted in discussion. One elder scientist raised a concerned hand. "But isn't this dangerous? A species that actively seeks out challenges." Do-hyun stood up then. The research team had agreed he should speak, even though it wasn't normal protocol. "You're asking the wrong question," he said clearly. "The real question is, what happens to species that don't challenge themselves? That always take the safest path." He walked to the podium as he continued. "The universe is full of dangers. Some you can avoid, but others will find you no matter what. Humans believe it's better to face danger on our own terms, to practice and prepare, than to hide and hope it never comes." The council chamber was silent for a moment. Then one of the younger council members spoke up. Could Could other species learn this approach? That's why we're here, Dr. Hyun-Ki said. We believe humans aren't just another Death World species. They're a preview of what any species can become if they learn to turn challenges into opportunities. He showed the final image. The research team trying human-style rock climbing, with safety equipment of course. We've already begun testing these theories. Under controlled conditions, even non-Death World species can learn to handle greater challenges, to push their limits safely, to grow stronger. The Council voted unanimously to create a new research division focused on human-style adaptive development. As they left the chamber, Do-hyun turned to Dr. Hyun-Ki. "So," he said with a grin, "ready to try skydiving next?" Dr. Hyun-Ki's scales showed a mix of worry and curiosity. "Perhaps, with proper safety measures and several months of preparation." "Now you're thinking like a human," Do-hyun laughed. "Small steps, careful practice, then take the leap when you're ready." The research team walked out together, already planning their next controlled risk. The galaxy would never be the same.